This is an SBC Media Partners production.
Swung on, hit high and deep, right field.
Phillies fans, these are your glove stories with Murph.
Let's check in with Greg Murphy. Murph, you got a special guest, huh?
Hi again, everyone, and welcome to Glove Stories with Murph, presented by Parks Casino Sportsbook app and the good folks at Red Robin. And today's guest spent parts of 4 decades in Major League Baseball, a 25-year career that spanned over the course of those 4 decades with 8 different teams, but many of those great years right here in Philadelphia. Of course, I'm talking about our good friend, Jamie Moyer, who I haven't seen in a little bit. It's good to see you, Jamie.
Good to see you, Murph.
Thanks so much for being here. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a pop quiz for you, because I want to know if you know the answer to this. Where were you on October 22nd, 1980?
Probably at a parade.
That's exactly right. What do you remember about that? You were 18 years old. The Phillies had just won their first World Series. You're a local kid, ball player, obviously. What do you remember about that day?
It was kind of crazy. People were climbing on the lights. We had come down on the subway, got off at the ballpark, just kind of mulling around with everybody else, 18-year-old kids. And, it was an exciting time, and we knew it was a parade, and it was just fun to be a part of it. That street corner, that whole area was a little different then than it is right now, right? Yeah. You got Xfinity, and the Spectrum was there, and the Vet was there. So, the visual, that I'm having is a lot different than probably a lot of people that, people that remember that are having that same visual. Yeah. But, the younger generation's probably like, what was that?
It did look a little different.
Day. We were kind of all over the place, and we kind of went down with a group of kids, but we got dispersed and scattered, and it was just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you fast forward to 2008, which we'll get to in a little bit, but a similar scene. But at that moment, probably hard for you to even begin to imagine, maybe not only a major league career like the one that you had, but also being a part of a parade that many years later as a player here in Philadelphia. When you're 18, you're about to embark on your college career. What was Jamie Moyer thinking about at that time in terms of a ball player and where he hoped to be one day?
Well, how cool would it have been to be in a parade someday? Right? You're at that parade. The other thing I forgot to mention, the clothing styles were a little different then. Right? I think there were several of the players had some long overcoats, like leather overcoats on, and top hats, and it was a little different. But back to your question, look, as a kid, and we all dreamed, right? Mm-hmm. And you get into these situations, whether you're at home laying in bed, or you're out on a baseball field playing, or you're at a parade, and these are things that you enjoy and you like, and you think, wow, how cool would that be to have the shoe on the other foot? Yeah. And I had no idea that would potentially ever happen, but having that opportunity to go to St. Joe like yourself, and have 3 great years at St. Joe, and then get drafted from there, and that this picture just kind of evolved over several years, and who would have thunk at the end of my career I would have ended up in Philadelphia, number one. Number two, piggybacking on a team, an old man piggybacking on a team that wins a World Series.
I'm not sure piggybacking is the right word. I think you're a pretty big part of what was happening in there. But like I said, we'll get to that in just a little bit. I want to take you back to those days at St. Joe's. Yeah, you're right. Both of us were able to enjoy some great years at St. Joe's. You as a student athlete, me just as a student, not really a good one either, but certainly enjoyed my time at St. Joe's. But as you progressed through your 3 years there with the Hawks, I mean, obviously at that time, not known for their baseball program per se, and their program's come a long way in recent years. But back then, you kind of were as you often did, were kind of grinding it out and keeping your eyes on the prize and keeping your eyes on that next step. And it enabled you that stepping stone to get drafted, right?
Yeah, I did it probably a little differently than most. My grades weren't the greatest out of high school. So, I ended up having to go to night school to prove to the school that I could do the work. I went to school my first semester in night school. So I worked at home and commuted to school. And I actually went to practice before I went to school, believe it or not. So I worked till lunch, came home, had some lunch, drove down to our field. The polo fields in Bryn Mawr at the time is the fields we were using.
Yep.
And, practiced, and then jumped in the car, drove to the school parking lot outside the gym. That's usually where I parked, and changed in the car, ate my bologna sandwich in the car, grabbed my books, and went into class from usually about 6 o'clock till about 9:30. And then drove home, attempted to do some homework, and got up the next day and did it all over again. Right. And then, obviously after my fall semester, I cut it where I could, or not cut it, but I mean, I made the grade and was able to transfer into the day school, and had a spring baseball, season. And from there, the rest is history.
It's funny when you stop to think about that, and everybody has a story, no matter where life has taken them, and all of those little things. The idea that, hey, you had to prove at that age that you deserve to be at St. Joe's, and then throughout your career, I would imagine just that little bit of learning about what you're capable of was really important moving forward, right?
Yeah, it's the challenges in life, and it's how you deal with those challenges and how you accept or deny them, and what you're going to do with it. How, and again, there was no script written for this. If you do the A, B, and C, this is going to happen. Let's just do A. Let's focus on A and see where the chips fall, and having that opportunity, to go to St. Joe, which then allowed me to play, collegiate baseball in the summer. I ended up playing for a team called the Allentown Wings, which no longer exists, but they went from Allentown to Quakertown, and I got some exposure there. Played with Jeff Trout, Mike Trout's dad, and a lot of other guys, Billy Sasselman from Kutztown State, kids from the Midwest, kids from the South, and Matt Kinzer, who was a second round, he was the punter at Purdue, and he was a second round pick of the Cardinals. So, I mean, and now, now you're playing with, some better talent,
right? And
you kind of see where you fit. And, again, that continues to push and drive, and, creates that, dangling that carrot in front of you to continue to go, and realizing that, hey, maybe I can play with these guys.
Yeah. And you certainly, so you spend 3 years at St. Joe's, you get drafted in 1984, 6th round, out of St. Joe's. What do you remember? Were you pretty certain that you were going to get drafted as early as you did?
No, I had no idea that I was going to be a 6th round pick. I was told maybe 10th, 12th, 15th round. It wouldn't have mattered. It really wouldn't have. It's all about, looking back on it, it's all about opportunity. And when you have an opportunity, you have to be prepared, or you have to be able to shift gears really quickly. And, again, learning how to learning how to be a good listener, learning how to take some chances, and knowing how and when to take those chances. And you don't always succeed, but you learn. And I think if you have the willingness to be able to learn and get better, and listen to people that you respect or have come before you that have done some things, and using these and using this is really important. And those opportunities continue to happen. I go to a mini spring training in Mesa, Arizona. I had never been west of the Mississippi in my life.
Yeah.
So, that was, an eye opener. And, now I'm playing with kids from all over the country, and, going there feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't play with these caliber kids that have, back then, high school teams in Texas were playing 50 and 60 games. Right. College baseball was playing in the spring. I want to say it was 60, 65 games. At St. Joe, if we were lucky, we played 30.
Yeah.
And that was a good year based on weather. Right.
Yeah.
So, there were so many but now getting there and realizing that, oh my gosh, I can play and I can, again, it's just another one of those little baby steps, and then you learn the system. I was with the Cubs, you learn the system, and it was the Cubs way. And, you had to walk to the ballpark, you had to walk home. It was hot. You had to there was a dress code. I mean, all these little details that you had to pay attention to, I think were part of the learning process I had and what kind of molded me from when I was molded at home, by my parents and in high school and at St. Joe. And, these are all little stepping stones as you move forward in life.
Yeah. And, so the discipline that you needed in all of those different facets at home with mom and dad, and then working your way into St. Joe's and then at St. Joe's and now in the minor leagues, all those little discipline points, those are the kind of things that build you up and make you the kind of person and the kind of player that you were. And certainly you were a guy, you just mentioned it, using your ears and your eyes to learn from the people who have gone before you. You've always been someone that's been able to do that. Who are some of the guys? I mean, you're talking, you're 20, 21, 22 years old, figuring out your way in the professional baseball world. Do you remember some of those guys that really kind of pushed you in the right direction? Maybe good and bad, perhaps.
My first manager, Tony Franklin, was a great man. He ended up being, he was an infield guy by trade, and he was a feisty little guy, and, I remember, him early in our season, and I was in Geneva, New York, and early in our season after a game, we didn't play well. He pulled everybody in, and we had all these little bar stool seats and, little stools in front of our, lockers. And, this is a little guy. We had some pretty big pitchers on our team. And he went around and he put his finger in everybody's face and he challenged everybody. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? We're going to have a fight. I mean, it just, and he just, but it was kind of a show, but it was also kind of a challenge. Right. And, I'm like, whoa, this is my first experience in pro ball, kind of, and my season was going pretty good. But he was, I looked at it, this was a team thing, right? And he was trying to get the best out of everybody. And looking back on it, that's what I took out of it. My first pitching coach there, Bill Ballou, he was a junior college pitching coach in New York somewhere. And he did this as a part-time job in the summer.
Wow.
Really nice man. He had this big, long Fu Manchu mustache, had that New York accent, but just an easy guy to talk to, an easy guy to listen to. And, did he play in the big leagues? No. I don't even know if he had any minor league experience, but he was a good person, right? So those are my two first guys as coaches that I had on a team. And then we had roving instructors, Erskine Thomason, who had some Philadelphia Philly ties back in the day. He was our roving pitching coach. And then, I move on to I go to single A the next year in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And Cal Emery was our manager. Rick Kranitz, who's now the pitching coach with the Atlanta Braves, was our pitching coach, had just got out of baseball. So he was probably in his late 20s, right?
Wow.
And was his first time being a pitching coach. And I was with Drew Hall, who was our second round pick, Carl Hamilton, who was a left-handed pitcher who had unbelievable stuff, I thought, from Chicago. And I don't know that he ever got past Double A. And I'm thinking, how am I going to pass this guy? And eventually I did. And he never, he kind of fell to the wayside. So, I mean, there was a lot of talent that I, not that I compared myself to, but I looked up to, thinking, wow, these guys are ahead of me. And I passed a lot of those guys. And then you start looking, well, geez, this guy, he was injured, or this guy had a bad attitude, or this guy struggled when he got into tough situations. So, I mean, you looking back on it, I learned from a lot of those things, and the conversations. You look in the minor leagues, you have yourself and your teammates.
Yeah.
And that's it, right? My first roommates in Geneva, New York was David Amaro, Ruben's brother, and a kid by the name of Rick Hopkins from California, who was a cocky little guy. And that was a good experience, right? Different personalities that you're living with and dealing with, and you have those on a team, and you're riding buses, and it's not the most comfortable, wasn't the most comfortable situation, but you learn to deal with it.
Yeah. You mentioned you have your teammates, you have yourself, and you have a whole lot of time on your hands.
Exactly.
And what you do at that time goes a long way as to developing the kind of player that you're going to be. You ask the question, how am I going to pass these guys? And eventually you do, and you work your way. And in 1986, you're a member of the Chicago Cubs. You make your major league debut. Do you remember, I'm sure you remember that day when you make your major league debut, do you remember thinking to yourself, how did I pass this? How am I here?
Yeah.
Why,
And what am I doing here? And how is this? With really within 2 years of baseball time, I was in the major leagues.
Yeah.
And that, back in that era, you spent 4, 5, 6 years in the minor leagues to get to the major leagues. Yeah. But I was fortunate. I was in an organization that was very, very, it was important to them to develop their own players, because that's kind of what the Cubs were doing at that time. Yeah. And I was kind of, not that unbeknownst to me until I, again, got a little bit older and kind of looked back on things, I followed another left-handed pitcher through the organization. And his name was Steve Engel. Okay. And I thought this guy was pretty talented too. And he got called up to the big leagues. Then I went to AAA, and he didn't stay in the big leagues very long. And he was kind of a little more of a mouthy kind of guy. And I think he rubbed some people the wrong way and never really got that chance. So when they sent him down, I got called up. And for whatever reason, I stayed. And it's not that I threw crazy numbers out there, but I to this day, I don't know why that happened the way it did. But I'll take it.
Yeah, because it was the beginning of what was really a remarkable career in the big leagues. And, when you just, take the longevity away, but still you look at your career and what you were able to accomplish and what you were able to do. And obviously culminating with a world championship, all of those things were many professional ball players will never get the opportunity to do what you were able to do. But it all started there in Chicago. Was Riggleman your manager at the time? He was, right?
No. My manager, my first manager in the big leagues was Gene Michael's first day in the big leagues.
Oh, there you go.
So Jim, who was it? Jim Fry. No, it wasn't Jim Fry. I'm trying to remember. It might have been Jim Fry got fired. Okay. No, Jim Fry was the general manager. Trying to think. Somebody got fired, and I got called up the day that Gene Michael took the helm for the first time. Okay. And it
was Jim Fry that got fired. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And then he went to the front office, I believe. So he was my manager. I think it was Billy Connors was my first pitching coach in the big leagues. And you see, Ruben Amaro Sr. was a coach there. Vuk was a coach there. Yep. And I believe Johnny Oates was a coach there, who I eventually played for Johnny Oates down the road in Baltimore. So, so here I go back to, some of my roots. Played with David Amaro, my first, minor league season. His dad was our coach, or my coach in the big leagues. Right. And then, many years later, Ruben Amaro was the assistant general manager and became the manager of the Phillies, or the general manager of the Phillies. And so I had ties with all three family members. I mean, small world, right? Who would have thunk? And then, and along in my journey, I also played with Dallas Green's son, John Green, when I was with the Cardinals in Louisville.
How about that?
And I also played with Claude Osteen's son, David Osteen, in Louisville. So, I mean, all these different, and I had an opportunity when I was in college to come to the vet. One, I would say it was morning or afternoon. And my coach, George Bennett at St. Joe, had set up an opportunity for me to hang out with Claude Osteen.
Wow.
And talk pitching and throw a little bit underneath the vet. So, I mean, all these little things during my career, they've crossed and they've pieced themselves together. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, it is. And it was all foreshadowing, pointing you back home, that at some point you were going to put on those pinstripes and kind of, I would, relive or live the boyhood fantasy that you had growing up just outside of Philly and watching that team play. You also played with some great players. You were with the Cubs early for a couple of years, Texas, Seattle, or not yet Seattle, St. Louis, Baltimore, Seattle, I think was the way it went.
Forgot Boston.
And Boston, for a cup of coffee as well. But some really great, I was back looking at some of your teammates and some of the guys that you played with. I mean, a list of Hall of Famers that you played with along the way. Again, anybody jump out at you that kind of made you say,
Murph, during my career, I had the chance to play with some really great people and great players.
Yeah.
And, I look back to milestones, not my milestones, but milestones that I was able to witness that happened in the game of baseball. I played with Andre Dawson the year he signed a blank contract with the Cubs and went out and had an MVP season. You want to talk about a man who is maybe one of the most professional people I've ever been around, and a fierce competitor, but a great teammate and a great human being. That was pretty cool. So, I mean, again, what a great example to be around, right?
Right.
Play with, the Sandbergs, the Dunstons, the Sutcliffes, I mean, that was pretty cool, right? They were in my early days. Then I go to play in Texas, and I had the opportunity to play with Nolan Ryan. Well, I think that speaks for itself. Another man that had an unbelievable career. Charlie Huff was on that team.
Right.
And now they go, well, Charlie Huff. Yeah. Charlie Huff was a great man. And knowledge in the game was off the charts. So, I mean, again, being around people like that, but witnessing Nolan Ryan's 5,000 strikeout, witnessing Nolan Ryan's 300th career win. You don't see that too often in a lifetime, right? We were teammates. I witnessed one of his no-hitters. Pretty cool, right?
Yes.
And again, another great person off the field. And I, got to hang around with these guys and have dinner with them and or have a beer with them or just sit and talk with them. I mean, it was really, really special to me. And then, a couple years later, who would have thunk, but I'm playing in Baltimore when Cal Ripken is chasing the Ironman streak, and I'm a teammate there where, he breaks Lou Gehrig's streak, and again, what a great person. And to watch that develop and him go through it and be a teammate and how he treated his teammates and how he took everything on and what he did, after games, signing autographs. There were many a nights where I'd be driving out of the ballpark and he'd still be signing autographs in the ballpark. And the line was up through the stands and around part of the concourse. And there were nights he was out signing autographs till 2:00 in the morning. Yeah, I mean, it's a real story. Yeah. And you got to pinch yourself and say, really? He did that? He did. I mean, crazy. And he showed up the next day at the ballpark ready to play. I mean, it's just, but these are all examples of people who were true professionals and knew how to treat people and knew how to play the game. And I mean, it was, those experiences, I mean, obviously the World Series and playing in Seattle when we won 116 games, they're a lot of fun. Those things were pretty cool too. But these experiences of being able to rub elbows with these guys, pitch with Goose Gossage. I mean, for the longest time, this guy was as bad could be as a closer, right?
Yep.
You know, I mean, play, Lee Smith, back when 91, 92 was hard, right? These guys were closers. I mean, it was really cool. Yeah, I mean, I could go on for hours talking about people that I played with and experiences that I had. At one, I forget what year it was, 88 or no, was it 98? Maybe I got an opportunity to go to an all-star game in Japan, play on an all-star team that went to Japan and played over there for a week. That was a blast.
Yeah.
To go to another country, be in another culture, and play against the Japanese players on their turf. But the team that we had, it was like pinch yourself. You're looking around going, all-star. What am I doing here? Right. But I mean, it was really cool to have these experiences.
Do you remember who the manager was of that team?
Mike Hargrove.
Oh, it was Mike Hargrove. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. It's cool, especially you go to a country like Japan who loves baseball and appreciates the game the way that they do in their culture. Understands the game as well as they do. That had to be a blast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And then getting towards the end of my career, coming to Philadelphia, which I had no idea that was going to happen, but it did. And a place where I grew up, and watching the Phillies. And I had met Steve Carlton a couple times. Obviously, it's well known. He was my idol. But kind of rubbing elbows with him. Hey, Steve, how you doing? Hey, Jamie, how you doing? I mean, it's just like, it's really, and then a couple of years ago, I went to the Hall of Fame for. I've been there for 2 Hall of Fame induction: Ken Griffey Jr. and Edgar Martinez.
Yep.
And I'm walking around inside the Hall of Fame where all the plaques are, and there's Steve Carlton. And I said, "Hey, Steve, let's go over and take a picture by your plaque." I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
yeah. Take you back to October 22nd, 1980,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that it is, we're very lucky. I consider myself very lucky to be in the world that we're in and have a chance to do some of the things that we get to do and meet the folks that we get to see. But, everything you're describing, having that front row seat, the history over and over and over again. If you've loved the game of baseball, which I know you do, you can't help but be excited when you think back to what you were able to see.
And to me, that's what it's about. It's about those experiences. You can't put a money value on them. You can't go buy it. It's just there. It's in front of you, and it's what you do with it, or what you take from it, or what you give to it. Whatever the situation is. And to me, that's the fun part about it. And then, I can have, do this interview and have this kind of conversation with you, and your listeners can go, "Oh, you're full of crap," or, "Hey, that's pretty cool," or but I mean, it's part of it, right? And then obviously, winning the World Series in '08. I mean, I don't know, that's basically the topper.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I would imagine it is, as a competitor, as a player. I mean, that's what you're playing for. You're in the postseason with Seattle 2 different times, and then you come to Philadelphia 2007, and obviously a big part of in 2007. One of the great memories is that final day. And I was looking back at an interview that you did shortly thereafter, and you talked about, you were pitching that final day. The Phillies needed to win, and you needed a little help. You needed the Mets to lose. You guys win the division at that point. You're driving to the ballpark, and you notice a little league game or a group of youngsters playing baseball, right? Do you remember that? Tell that story about what that made you think about.
I'm trying to think of the streets, but it's just right by the highway.
Okay.
Right where that goes over to New Jersey. That's what is that? That's not the Schuylkill, but it's
95, I-95.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a bunch of little kids there, and I'm like, wow, not too long ago. Well, I guess kind of long ago, but that's what I was doing.
Right.
Right. And right down the street is a World Series going to happen. I mean, it's, and it just kind of puts it all together. Right. But it keeps you in a really healthy, humble place. Yeah. Right. And how simple this game is, but how difficult it is. Right.
No doubt.
But, and there's a lot in between. There's a whole lot in between.
Talk a little bit about so you guys win the division in 07, and that was such a for this city, it was cathartic. I mean, it hadn't happened hadn't happened since 93 would have been the time before. That's a long time. That's a generation of people that were waiting and wanting, and you guys were able to deliver that. I remember the city, and I remember exactly where I was when I looked down and the Mets were getting smoked, and you guys started a half hour later, and you guys started, and got out to an early lead.
That was the advantage. That was the advantage.
It was mentally, sure.
Because I can remember walking out to the bullpen, knowing the game had already started, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was a score already that had taken place. Right,
7 runs
early, right, in the Mets game. So it was like, okay, good. Now, the Marlins are doing their job, right?
Yep.
But now the Phillies need to do their job, right? And to me, that was my mindset. Okay, a little piece of me is like, all right, that's what's happening. But now you really got to stay focused on what is your task today. Are you going to go out and give up 7? Or are you going to go out and pitch, right? And to me, that's what I really had to focus on. But like you said, knowing that in advance was helpful.
You were in your 19th season in the big leagues at that point. And I wonder, were there nerves? Were there butterflies on that day?
There's always nerves, always. And I look at it as saying, if you're not nervous, something's wrong. I mean, because that's a human instinct that we have. If you don't get nervous, if you don't have butterflies, you got to check yourself.
Yeah.
And, like you said, I always had some sort of butterflies, but I knew as when the game started, they went away because you were focused on so many other things that really didn't come into play. If it continued to bother you, to me, then that became a distraction.
Right.
So the mental
word, yeah, I'm sorry. You used the word focus a couple of different times in these last couple of answers, and I know that was such a big part of your success. Harvey Dorfman, who we all know in Philadelphia, know an awful lot about, was a big part of your career, and you credit him as a big part of your success, don't you?
The mental part of the game. And that's probably where I struggled early in my career, right? And this book came out, The Mental Guide to Baseball, and read this book and thought I understood it. And then I had the opportunity in 1991 to go visit Harvey for 2.5 days, and boy, he really kind of opened the book up even more to me. But it opened my mind to look at what's going on inside of my mind and how I was handling things and approaching things, and maybe some of the negativity that I had. And I needed to learn how to get rid of that, release that, let it go, and focus on the things that I could control, and the things that I couldn't control, just to kind of let them go. And then when there's noise, how do you make that quiet? And learning, and that was a process that took a while to learn how to do, but for me, you have to have an awareness to it. What is that awareness, and what are my thoughts and what are my feelings? How does that make me feel? So learning that and understanding that, then I could start to work on it. And, it took a lot of work, but it was fun work, and it was a challenge that I had to work on for the rest of my career. But it eventually just became part of my day each day. And so it would be like anybody, excuse me, that has say you have a job that you just go in and you do the same thing every day. Well, that's kind of how I was with my job. And you think, oh, well, really? You did but that I got on a schedule. And when, the day I pitched, boy, I was really regimented. I use the clock, and all right, from this time to this time, I'm doing this, and this time to that time. And that's just how it rolled. And so, even in the World Series game, in game 3, when the game I was fortunate enough to start, we had a rain delay, boy. And it was just like, somebody was just like putting me through the ringer because
we'll test
you know,
you.
because once you get to game time, the Phillies have no control over it, and the league the umpires, the league took control of it. And, they've got the airport weather, the local weather, the national weather, and they're getting all these we're going to, we might have a window. We might not have a window, we're just try for a half hour, and I'm a little bit, I'm telling Rich Doobie, I'm like, look, I'm going to need 35 minutes. I'm afraid they're going to just say, okay, let's go.
Right. And
I'm like, I can't do that. I need time. I'm older. I need time to get loose and all that. And it's cold and damp and, so I was like a bull in a china shop. I remember that. And boy, I had, I wasn't feeling good. Plus I had butterflies. I mean, it just was, it was not fun. I was miserable at that point until the game started.
And then you were ready to go.
Yeah.
Do you play 25 years in the big leagues if you don't beat Harvey Dorfman, do you think?
That's a great question, and you're the first person to ever ask that. That's phenomenal.
Yes.
You know what? It would have been a struggle. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how prevalent he was with my career, and he opened my eyes to me having to make adjustments, but I had to do the work. And he would tell me, I'm not doing the work for you. I can't tell you what it is. You have to figure it out. But he's the one that challenged me. And, he was a brash man. I mean, he was a Northeasterner. Yep. And he had this raspy voice. Loved him to death, though. And I can still hear his voice in my head, talking. And, there were many times after, I met with him that we would talk on the phone. And, during my career, I could go back to a lot of those phone conversations that were just so helpful.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so interesting to hear that side of the game because, ball players, you guys are great athletes. You're there for a reason because you're athletically gifted, but there is so much more to the game of baseball than just being able to do it physically. And I think probably even more so for pitchers than maybe hitters who pitchers have that chance once every 5 days kind of thing. Right. You really have to kind of stay within yourself if you're going to.
And you have to understand you have to learn how to deal with failure.
Yeah.
Because it really, if you think about it, that's what the game of baseball is. It's about failure and how you as an individual, but also you as a team deal with that failure. Yeah. And if you just let that permeate and I've been on teams and there's teams playing right now that, I think it's the Orioles have 37 wins. The Diamondbacks have 36, 37, 38 wins. They've gotten used to losing.
Yeah.
Right? You can say they're a bad baseball team. Maybe they are, but they've got in this mode of losing and accepting losing. So how do we change that? So again, organizations we got to change this culture, right? You hear that talked about a lot in all sports. We got to change this culture. But when you get complacent and you're okay with losing, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So, but it starts with you as an individual, but then it's a team. And you got to stop that festering.
And on the flip side, that's why there are some organizations that always seem to be in the mix. It's because they have this culture of winning on the flip side, which is what every organization, I believe, is attempting to do. And we heard that here in Philadelphia in the mid 90s, into the early 2000s. Got to change that culture up a little bit, and they were able to do that. And then you guys went on the run.
It's the organizations that stick to it.
Yeah.
And say, look, if this isn't going to work with this guy or group of guys, we need to, not that they're bad people, but it's just not working. So we've got to change that. And how do we change that? We've got to, subtract and we've got to add. And that's where I think, a guy by Pat Gillick was so good at, he could evaluate talent, but he also evaluated people.
Yeah. He could read the room.
Exactly. He was really, really good with that. And I'm sure he had a lot of people around him that were, the same way. So, but yeah, I've had the opportunity to play under Pat twice in two different organizations, and saw how he changed things. Right. And, in Seattle, I had him in Seattle, and, we didn't get to a World Series, but we won a lot of baseball games and brought a lot of joy to a community that never really had, winning baseball.
Yeah.
And then we got old, and, and the other trick to front office is, all right, old and injuries, how do we deal with that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a tough one too, because you've got, players that are, the face of the organization. I'll give you an example. Albert Pujols.
Yep.
Right. Look what happened in St. Louis, and look back in the day, when you were working with the Phillies and I was playing with the Phillies, it was Ryan Howard, go back to those times when his contract was coming up, and Albert Pujols was they were both kind of in the same space. Right.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do? Well, the Phillies kept Ryan, and it turned out to be great. And the Cardinals let Albert move on, but Albert's still playing, hanging on, and he's with the Dodgers now, and things are still great. But I mean, it just, you look at things, the whys, the hows, and and Ryan Howard, was a fan favorite. How do you get, now you're pulling at heartstrings, not only with the fans but with the organization.
Yeah. It's probably one of the most difficult things. And we just saw it in Chicago. The Chicago Cubs just went through exactly what the Philadelphia Phillies had to go through after they win in 2008. A couple of years later, they're making all these decisions. Well, the Cubs just made those decisions and parted ways with a lot of icons, in their franchise that brought them a World Series. It's interesting and it's difficult, but it's what you have to do to be successful. All right. We only got a couple more minutes. I want to ask you two more things. You wrote a book, Just Tell Me I Can't. And there's a lot of great anecdotes in that book. And I just, there was a couple that I wanted you to tell, quickly. You obviously, physically, we know what you did on the field, but you talked about the mental side of the game as well. But there are so many little things that happen in a baseball game that I don't think just your casual fan even understands. And one of the things that you talked about in the book is how you used to change on the fly. You would signal your catcher that you were going to throw a fastball in the outside corner as opposed to the inside corner, which is what he called. And you would do that as you were in your motion. Am I right? With the team?
I had, if I had a catcher that had the ability to pay attention to my body. Yeah. And that would just be, I just kind of smile and
mid delivery.
That would change. Yeah. I could do that. Or as I was starting, I would do that. And I actually had, at times I would have perceptive hitters. I don't know why they were looking at my face, but they'd say, "Why are you smiling on the mound?" And I'd be like, "Oh, like a deer in the headlights. You caught me." Well, they didn't know what I was, they just looked at it. I was smiling.
Right.
But I was really changing location. I learned that one from Nolan Ryan.
To me, that is such a cool little thing that you guys develop, that if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it. But B, if you don't understand the game, I mean, the ability to throw on the inside corner versus the outside corner is such an important part of being able to pitch in the big leagues. It may not seem like a whole lot, but it's huge. And to be able to communicate like that with one of your catchers, is really cool.
that deletes all the excessive shaking, yes, no. And the thing in baseball, if you shake yes and then you shake no, that means yes, I want the pitch, no, I don't want the location. So why would I do that to make, and if you got a smart hitter, he knows that's a fastball coming. So now I can cover that on both sides of the plate. So I don't have to go through all the antics with my catcher as long as he's on board with me.
It's such a cool thing. And I wonder, and you talked about it, how when you would change teams that you, every once in a while, you might be facing someone that knew that little trick. So you would just drop a curveball smile and drop a curveball, show your teeth, just to keep them off balance, right?
Exactly. Keep everybody honest. You got to play the game.
So great. All right. And the other story I want you to tell real quick is the David Justice story. And I know you've told this one many times, but for folks that don't know the story, again, it just kind of, it humanizes what it is you guys are out there doing. I mean, you're playing a game of baseball. You're trying to win. They're trying to win. David Justice, a great hitter in his day. And you had a battle with him one day. So go ahead. You tell the story.
I was in Seattle. He was in Cleveland. It was one of these at-bats. It was foul ball, foul ball, foul ball. I mean, it was 7, 8 in a row. And after I threw the pitch and he fouled it off, I walked towards home plate with my glove up to get another ball. And I said, David, what do you want? And he looks at me and he goes, fast. And he says it with his mouth, fastball. I said, okay. I turned around and I couldn't, think that and then throw something else. My mind just, so I did. I threw a fastball. Next pitch. And now we had a several run lead. Okay. I wouldn't have done this in a 2-1 game.
Sure.
And he hit it over the fence, center field fence, and he started laughing. He's laughing all the way around. He couldn't believe that I threw the pitch. He hit it all that. He hit a home run. He got all the way. He's still laughing all the way around the home plate. And he gets in the dugout and he, told all of his teammates, you won't believe what he did. He told me he was going to throw a fastball. He threw it and I hit a home run. And, he was in the dugout. He was laughing, and, every time I see him, as I live in California now, and every time I see him, that story comes up and we laugh about it. But, I've done that, many a times with hitters. Again, it's a mind game. And if I can get in your head a little bit, and to get that advantage, then I have the advantage. So that in that case, it didn't work out. But you know what? And you look at my numbers over the course of my career, I gave up a lot of home runs. So it was a solo home run, no biggie, and we got a story out of it. We can laugh about it.
That's right. And you know what? More often than not, that mental game worked in your favor. You were able to use that mental game for great success over the course of your career.
Oh, there were, you can't imagine how many times I like to go out early in the day and run. And the visiting team might be out taking early batting practice. And I'm trying to think of this guy's name. He was a second baseman for the Yankees at the time. I was in Baltimore and I'm doing my running and I'm like, man, every time I throw a changeup away, you just flare it over down the right field line. And he's like, yeah, I don't know how I'm hitting that ball. And I said, well, you know what? I don't know. I'm going to have to change something, but I had this conversation with him. Right. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, now I'm just going to start throwing it on the plate below the zone. And all of a sudden he didn't know what to do with it. And he started rolling over it, ground ball. But I mean, it's just Kevin Seitzer is another guy when he was back in the day when he was in Milwaukee. I couldn't get this guy out to save my life. And I'd tell Danny Wilson, just tell him what's coming. I don't care because I can't get him out. Mark Kotze was the same way. And I just started throwing him fastball away. And I'd get on the mound and I'd tell the catcher, for the whole game today, I don't care what the situation is, I'm throwing him all fastballs down and away because that's the least place he can do damage with it.
Yeah.
Right. So I'd be on the mound and he'd put down a couple pitches. Nope. Yep. Next pitch. Nope. I might step off, step back on. And all of a sudden I started throwing one pitch, what I was doing with my head shaking. And, now it made him think, but I just kept throwing the same pitch.
Driving these guys nuts. It reminds me a little bit. We've talked to a handful of guys over the course of the last couple months, and one of the things that people talked about when they were trying to get Tony Gwynn out was that they gave up trying to make the perfect pitch. They just started throwing it down the middle because it was like, you know what, he can hit everything, so I might as well just try to throw some strikes down the middle.
Yeah, we had those same conversations about Tony Gwynn, but we also had those same conversations about Frank Thomas.
Wow.
The guys that like to stay inside the ball, you throw it down the middle, they have to make a choice.
Yeah.
So if you're throwing it in or away, you've already made their choice. They just react to it. So yeah, it's just funny how, when when you got guys that are kind of manhandling you, you try to come up with different ways.
Yeah, well, that's what you got to do. It's the game of baseball, the game of adjustments. Yep. All right, we started this conversation by talking about a parade back in 1980 that you were a part of as a fan, but obviously we'll end this conversation at the parade 2008 that you were a part of as a player. And,
yep.
You know, I can't even imagine what that must be like to just kind of put that in perspective in your life, that, you know, here you are just outside your hometown playing for the Phillies, winning their second championship in their history, their very long and storied history, and
yep.
being a part
yep.
of that celebration that day, which was gives me chills right now thinking about it. I can't imagine how it felt for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, you know, a very emotional day that I had no expectation of that happening. Yeah. Obviously, you're exhausted after playing, and, you know, all the antics after the game and staying up and hanging out with your teammates and all that. But, you know, going to the parade, I didn't really expect a whole lot. And, you know, we had our little secret little place where we got on the buses and they took us to the floats, and we got on the floats and we're kind of above, you know, Independence Hall, and, you know, there weren't many people out. It's like, oh, this is, you know, what are we doing? This is kind of crazy. And then we make a turn and we go down through this little street and go up underneath the tunnel, and all of a sudden come around Independence Hall, and, you know, Broad Street's just a sea of people. It was just, I mean, it was unbelievably emotional. The happiness that, you know, you saw with people. I mean, literally there were people sitting on the curb crying, you know, and, you know, when you start to think about it, you're like, wow, this has really, this winning the World Series has touched so many people in so many different ways, right? And, you know, and as I've been back to Philadelphia several times since then, you know, everybody's got a story about where they were when the games were being played. They were at the parade, or they couldn't get to the parade because public transportation broke down, or whatever it was, or they got halfway there and they hitchhiked and whatever it was. But I mean, and to me, that's the fun of it all. And that's where you create that connection with the fans. And, you know, and it's just, and everybody, you know, it's a day when everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody's.
Yeah. It was a chamber of commerce kind of day, weather-wise, and that, yeah, you're right. That scene, it was euphoric.
And then, and then as you get down by the park to the stadium, I mean, you couldn't see the grass in the park. Yeah. It was just people. I mean, it's like, how many, you know, this is, you know, they said, what, 2 million people?
Something like that. Yeah.
I mean, it was every bit of that. And, you know, you get into the stadium, and then we went over to Lincoln Field, or the Eagles Field, the Lincoln Field. And it was crazy over there. But I mean, I'll tell you what, at the end of that day, talk about exhausted.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the culmination of playing and the World Series and the emotions, and I mean, it was all worth it. Believe me, it was all well worth it. But I'll tell you what, the parade was for me, was as big as winning the World Series. It was really cool. Yeah. Really cool to share that with the Philadelphia community and the fan base, and very special.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, I can't help but think that had you not gone on to be a big league ball player and you know, taken a different path in your life, that perhaps you would have been one of those 2 million people, you know, cheering them on, because you were when you were 18. So why not when you were 38 or whatever you were? Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
It would have been, but you know what? Glad that you weren't. Glad you weren't down on street level. Glad you were up there on the float.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Jamie, I knew this would be a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking a couple minutes and telling some stories about your storied career, because it certainly was that. I was lucky enough to get a chance to spend a year with you on the road as we were broadcasting together, and get to know you not just as a player but as a person. And as great of a player as you were, you know, I can easily say a better person. And it was so much fun being a part of that with you. We miss you certainly over here in Philadelphia, but I know you're enjoying that life out there in California. It's not all that bad, right?
No, I'm enjoying my life out there, but I will share with you, I can get my contacts in all by myself now.
I was going to ask you that. All right. So you brought it up.
That's
so
a little side story.
Yeah. So when Jamie and I were broadcasting together, I've been wearing contact lenses since I was in like 8th grade, and you just had gotten your contact lenses as we were broadcasting, and you struggled to put them in your eyes.
Struggled mightily.
So I would get a phone call in my hotel room when we were on the road. Hey, Murph, you mind coming down and help me put my contact lenses in? Jimmy, I got to be honest. I tell this story all the time because people think it's hysterical. They love it. I would come down and I would help you. I would actually put your contact lenses in your eyes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to see you've grown to be able to do that now too.
Exactly. I'm a big boy.
Well, it's certainly, that's a fun story to remember. They were good times. They certainly were. Well, like I said, Jamie, thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for sharing your glove stories with the folks in and around Philadelphia. Like I said, we miss you here in Philly, but glad to see you're doing well out there in California, and hopefully we'll see you soon. All right.
All right. Miss y'all, and thanks for having me on today.
All right. Jamie Moyer joining us here on Glove Stories with Murph, brought to you by the Parks Casino Sportsbook app and the great folks at Red Robin as well. We'll be right back right after this. Glove Stories with Murph is presented by Parks Casino Sportsbook app. New users download an app store or click parkscasino.com/PA and use the promo code MONEY for first bet risk-free up to $500. Must be 21. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Glove Stories with Murph is brought to you by Red Robin. Whether you're hungry for a juicy gourmet burger with bottomless steak fries and an ice-cold beer, or a crispy chicken tender salad and freckled lemonade, whatever you crave, there's something for everyone at Red Robin. So dine in or order curbside to go, delivery, or catering. Order online now at order.redrobinpa.com. Welcome back to Glove Stories with Murph, brought to you by the Parks Casino Sportsbook app. And once again, we welcome in Larry Bowa as we relive the 1980 championship season. And wow, I'll tell you, we have moved into the month of September. How quickly the baseball season goes when you're reliving it, just a little bit at a time. But it was crunch time, Larry, as you guys head into September. September 1st, you're in San Francisco playing the Giants at Candlestick Park. The Giants, a pretty good team at the time, 66 and 65. You guys were 9 games over 500 at 69 and 60. However, you had just come up the West Coast from San Diego in a game that you lost on the previous day on Sunday afternoon, and things were not all things weren't all going all that well for your team, and management was going to let you know it, right?
Well, Murph, a lot of things that you look back on your career, you have to think about what happened. But on this one, I'll never forget this one, because we had played in San Diego, and Gary Maddox, to me, who's as good a center fielder as I've ever seen, he lost the ball in the sun in San Diego with no sunglasses on. And I guess that was the icing on the cake, because Paul Owens was on the trip, and of course Dallas was our manager, and they were very, very mad. And in fact, I remember checking in San Francisco, and I said, "Hey, Pope," and no answer, no reply. And so the next day they called a meeting, and Paul Owens led the meeting. And you talk about going up and down every locker and chastising us. You guys have never won anything. You think you're better than you are. You're reading your press clippings. You've never gotten to the dance. You've had good years, but you've never got over the hump. I mean, he undressed us. It was such a bad meeting that the players we called up, we got to extend the roster to 40. Mm-hmm. He didn't want them in the meeting because they weren't there all year. So why should they take that? But he went up and down. He went to every locker and tell you what you didn't do right. And it had a lasting effect on our ball club. And anytime you go to Candlestick, Murph, that was a tough place to play. The wind, and it was cold. And we knew we had a big series there. And after that meeting, it was like, we better start winning more games and playing better. We basically gave that game in San Diego away.
Yeah, and there weren't games to give away at the time. I mean, the
Right.
race was so tight. You begin the month of September, 1.5 game out of first place in the NL East. Pittsburgh had the half-game lead, but the Expos and the Phillies are tied at a half game back. So, you've got 3 teams that have a chance to win this division easily. Whoever's going to play better in September is going to win this division. Pope knew that. Dallas knew that. And you guys obviously knew that as well. But they wanted to make sure you knew it as you headed into San Francisco, right?
There's no question. And being on the West Coast, Murph, you have a chance. You see the East Coast teams, and when you see a team like Pittsburgh that already won, or Montreal, I'm not saying it puts more pressure on you, but you're saying in your mind, we better win this game because we're going to run out of games. And again, going out to San Francisco wasn't easy to play out there. And as you alluded to, that team, it has some good baseball players, no great players, but good baseball players. And every time we went out there, it was tough to play out there. But this was a game that we had to have. And that meeting obviously gave us a little shove there in the right direction.
Little motivation. All right. Well, you also had Steve Carlton on the hill for this game versus Eddie Whitson. It was the Giants who got things started first. They would double the lead off the game. Carlton threw a wild pitch, and they would advance. He got a strikeout, but then Jim Wolford would double, and it was quickly 1-0 Giants. And you're probably thinking about, oh God, we're going to have another table overturned inside the clubhouse if we lose this one. But top of the second, Philadelphia gets right back at it. McBride singles, trio singles. You grounded out to second, but the run scores, doing the little things, getting the runs across.
Right.
That's what you guys did.
That's what we did.
Yeah,
yes,
you really did. And and going back and looking at these games so often, that is the way you are able to get back into a game, by the little bit of the fundamentals, right?
Right. I mean, everybody basically knew their role, Murph. We knew the guys in the middle, Murph. Schmitty and Bull were the big power guys, and if I hit towards the top, or even if I hit 7th or 8th, my job was to get on base and create havoc to get to the top of the order. And it wasn't one of those things where somebody had to tell you, hey, make sure you get the guy. You knew what you had to do when you got in the box. Each guy had a role to do. I knew I wasn't hitting home runs. Booney knew he wasn't hitting home runs. So there was things that we had to do to help our baseball team win. And it didn't, we felt it was a good thing if you hit a ground ball with a man on third, you got the run in. It wasn't a matter of, oh, my average dropped. It was, you have a job to do and do it. And that's how we played.
Yeah, that's how you play. It's a team game, the team aspect of the game for sure. All right, so Phils would add one in the top of the third, RBI single by Schmitty, and the Giants would tie it up in the bottom of the fourth after an error by Pete Rose allowed the base runner to score. But in the fifth, you guys get it right back. 2 outs, Lazinski singles, Manny Trio singles, then you single, both runners score 4-2. And we touched on this last week when you were on, but let me ask about it again. August and September for you in 1980 offensively were 2 of the best months of your career offensively. You look back and you look at your numbers, man, you were coming up with big hits left and right.
Yeah, I had made a couple comments, obviously, in the paper that were misquoted, and the fans let me know about it. And I figured, hey, I better produce here because they're going to be on me for a while. And they were on me for a while. But to me, that motivated me, Murph. I was one of those guys that played with a chip on my shoulder. And so every game I went up there, in fact, the announcers used to say, now, if I went 0 for 1, hey, guys, let's just start booing Bowa again because he'll get hot here. And I did. Those were my 2 best months. And I look back at that. And looking back in that San Francisco series, it seemed like every time I went out there, I had a lot of people, family come because Sacramento's an hour and a half there. And so I tried maybe I put too much pressure on myself, but every time they came out there, I wanted to do good. And because I didn't lead just 2 passes, it was 25, 30, 35 passes. And, so it was nice to have a good game out there with your family there and your friends. But that was a game that stands out in my mind. And to this day, when Paul Owens was alive, I used to ask him, I said, what made you have that meeting besides that bad play we had in San Diego? He says, well, first of all, I knew Carlton was pitching. I'm not going to have a meeting if I know the number 5 starter's pitching. So Pope had all this stuff planned, a very intelligent general manager, and knew what buttons to push. And he, like I said, he knew Carlton was pitching, and we're probably going to be a good chance we're going to win the game.
That's, to me, that's so interesting. That's fascinating. That the mindset to think that deeply into when I'm going to explode on these guys. It's great because, hey, ultimately it worked. I mean, certainly it looks like it worked.
Pope was the best. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Pope was a great GM.
Yeah. Great baseball man for sure. All right. Bottom of the seventh, Giants would tie it up. But in the eighth, you guys right back at it with 1 on and 1 out. You single, move up to second on a wild pitch. Then Booney singles, knocks you in. Then Carlton would single, and he would move up on a wild pitch. Greg Gross reached on an error, and Carlton scores on that 6-4 Phillies. I bring that up because Steve Carlton not only going to go 9 innings in this one, you had all the faith in the world that Dallas had all the faith that he could go 9 innings, but he used to help himself with the bat all the time, right?
Hey, Murph, he was a real good hitter for a pitcher. I mean, this guy, if you good at bats, there's a lot of times he went up there with nobody on, and you could see he would flail at some pitches. But if there was guys in scoring position or the game was tight, he would give you a quality at bat. He had a great pickoff move. He fielded his position unbelievable. And we all know what kind of pitcher he was. So he was one of the elite pitchers that could do everything. Hole runners. If you needed a sacrifice bunt, he could do that. If you needed a base hit, he could swing the bat. He was a very talented individual, and we know the Hall of Fame pitcher that he was.
Sure. Yeah. He got lots of wins just because of how talented that left arm was. However, he helped himself win too in a lot of different ways. And pitchers,
no question.
Hey, why not? If you can do it, do it. I'd like to see more of that nowadays, for sure. All right. So Carlton goes all 9. You guys win the game. So Pope allows you to have dinner that night in the clubhouse, doesn't turn your tables over, which is nice. And the Pirates lose that day. Expos Phil's win. So on September 1st, going into September 2nd, a 3-way tie at the top of the NL East. I have to imagine, I know fans are, and I know the media are, but are players and coaches scoreboard watching at that point?
Oh, no question. In fact, I started scoreboard watching the last couple of weeks of August. I mean, when guys say they don't scoreboard watch, they might be telling the truth, but when you're sitting in the dugout and then the big out-of-town scoreboards up there, you see the scores.
Yeah.
And, you might want to not look, or they used to have how many runners were on, and you say, oh, who's pitching now? Or you watch that. The team that snuck up on everybody, really, we knew Pittsburgh was good. It's Montreal. They had all the young talent, and they were finally putting it together. And as you just said, it ended up being a 3-team race, and we knew we were in a dogfight the rest of the year.
Yeah, and there would be some pretty big games coming up against Montreal in a couple of weeks, and I guarantee you we're going to talk about those as well as we move through the month of September 1980 and relive the Phillies' first World Championship season with Larry Bowa. All right, Larry, that'll do it for today. Thanks for being with us, and I don't know, I'm getting excited. See how this thing turns out.
It's fun watching this replay and talking about things that happened, but one or two things that you mentioned, it brings my memory back, and it's a lot of fun going through this, Murph.
It certainly is. All right. Well, Larry, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
All right, Murph. Take care.
Glove Stories with Murph is brought to you by Red Robin. Whether you're hungry for a juicy gourmet burger with bottomless steak fries and an ice cold beer, or a crispy chicken tender salad and freckled lemonade, whatever you crave, there's something for everyone at Red Robin. So dine in or order curbside to go, delivery, or catering. Order online now at order.redrobinpa.com. Glove Stories with Murph is presented by Parks Casino Sportsbook app. New users download an app store or click parkscasino.com/PA and use the promo code MONEY for first bet risk-free up to $500. Must be 21. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Glove Stories with Murph is presented by Parks Casino Sportsbook app and Red Robin and is a production of SBC Media Partners. The engineer for Glove Stories is Chad Evans. Cindy Webster is our marketing and guest relations director, and our executive producer is Roger Haddon. Whether you are watching us on YouTube or downloading the podcast from one of our major podcast providers like Apple, Google, or Spotify, make sure to hit like and subscribe so that we can let you know when a new episode of Glove Stories is available. We'll release new episodes weekly throughout the 2021 Major League Baseball season.